Section 1. Hey guys, tonight we're going to stroll quietly into a world of truly epic paperwork. A world where quills were mightier than swords, not in some poetic sense, but because people were actually afraid of getting stabbed with one over a missed comma. Welcome to the Byzantine Empire, not through the blood-stained gates of battle, but through the faintly mildew-scented doors of bureaucracy. That's right. You're entering Constantinople not as a warrior or priest, but as a desk-bound scribe. You'll hear the rustle of parchment, the faint clink of wax seal stamps, the whisper of sandals gliding across polished stone floors. You'll smell the ink, smoky, fermented, and a little like seaweed, and see hallways filled not with danger, but with silence, paperwork, and the occasional yawn. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to know where you're watching from, and what time it is for you right now. Drop it in the comments. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake in a modest room with stone walls and a wooden cot. Outside, Constantinople is already humming with the sounds of bakers, vendors, and church bells, but your day will not begin with bells, it begins with ink. You are a grammatikos, a minor functionary in one of the city's many administrative offices. You don't collect taxes, you don't carry messages, and you certainly don't attend military briefings. Your task is simpler, you copy things. All day, every day, in the most beautiful, legible Greek you can manage. Today, like most days, you begin by trimming your quill. It was once a goose feather. You've named it Andronikos, not because you're sentimental, but because if you don't make it personal, you'll scream. The ink pot is crusted at the edge, but the color still runs smooth, black as midnight, mixed with soot, gum, and vinegar. You make your way down the hall, ducking past a senior scribe who coughs meaningfully if you walk too loudly. Office politics are sharp here, and they smell faintly of myrrh and resentment. You pass the archive room, a cavern of scroll racks and pigeonholes, each labeled in a calligraphy so elaborate it may take you another decade to decode. One shelf simply reads, Rice, edicts regarding. Another, foreign correspondence, possibly misfiled. Your desk is in a corner, near a window that does not open. You sit, you sigh, you begin. Your first task is to recopy a land grant issued under Emperor Leo VI. It's from 30 years ago, but apparently the original was smudged by a clerk with oily fingers. You're not mad, you're just tired. Still, you press your stylus into the wax tablet to sketch out the new copy before committing it to parchment. This is the first draft, which must then be approved by your superior, who, rumor has it, hasn't actually read a document since the Battle of Manzikert. The hours drift. Outside, the world turns. In here, nothing changes except the scroll pile growing slightly taller. You're visited by a colleague, Theodolos, who brings news from another office. Someone filed a request for ink and received an eggplant instead. Hilarity ensued. It's the closest thing to drama you'll get all week. Historians still argue how much actual power low-ranking Byzantine bureaucrats had. Some believe they were mere drones, interchangeable and dull. Others argue that they quietly shaped policy, nudging decisions through selective copying and deliberate misinterpretation. You're just trying not to fall asleep in your own handwriting. You pause midday for a meal of bread, cheese, and lukewarm wine. You eat at your desk, of course. There is no lunchroom, just crumbs in the margins, and the faint risk of spilling wine on an imperial decree. As evening settles in, you light a small oil lamp. The shadows shift. The letters glow. Your fingers ache. And yet, you feel something odd. A calm. A rhythm. A sense of being part of something larger, longer, quieter. A paper-thin empire that's somehow held for 1,000 years. You cap your ink. Fold your scroll. Whisper goodnight to Andronikos. And dream of stamps that never smudge. Section 2. You arrive at the office early today, not out of ambition, but because you misread the sundial again. It's fine. The only thing more persistent than your punctuality is the Empire's obsession with filing things. And today, you've been assigned to the archive room. It's known unofficially as the paper forest. The room is dim and dry, nestled deep within the Chalke Gate complex. The walls are lined floor to ceiling with cubbies, scroll racks, bundled sheaves, tide reeds, and hanging wax tablets. It smells like dust, beeswax, and the collective sighs of generations past. You take one step inside, and your sandals echo with the weight of forgotten orders. A clerk named Menodoros, who looks like he hasn't blinked since Theophilos was emperor, hands you a warn list. "Find these," he says without inflection. "They are wanted before the next lunar cycle." Perhaps. He wanders off. He may be a ghost. You're not sure. The list includes a decree about fish taxes near Nicaea, a rescript on goat ownership boundaries from 867 AD, something called Instructions for the Removal of Geese from Public Bathhouses. You nod solemnly and begin. The filing system makes no modern sense. Scrolls are arranged not by date, nor subject, nor emperor, but by a Byzantine logic best described as just because. One shelf holds nothing but grain allotments for one monastery over a 42-year period. Another contains military leave records stapled to weather reports. You locate a scroll tagged with red ribbon. This denotes copy of a copy, meaning it may or may not be accurate, and certainly not binding. You make a note. You don't know where the notes go. Perhaps to the bottom of the sea. Next, you uncover a curious bundle bound in thread. Inside, 2 letters, one unfinished and a walnut. No explanation. You add this to the ambiguous holdings basket. The Empire has many such baskets. You spend an hour searching for the goose directive. It is naturally stored under A, for animals, disruptive. You read aloud. Geese shall not be permitted to linger in state baths beyond the second bell. It is signed in a florid hand by a man called Strategos Glykos, whose name, ironically, means sweet. Historians still debate how such documents were stored and retrieved. Some sources suggest elite clerks carried memories of entire categories in their heads, oral indexes, essentially. Others believe things were simply lost and rewritten constantly, creating an empire made entirely of revision. You find this plausible. Menodoros returns, inspects your finds without reading them, and nods once. Acceptable. Then he disappears again, possibly to haunt a fresco. You spend the afternoon sorting scrolls by ribbon color, red for copies, green for corrections, gold for the emperor's direct order, often ignored, and black for do not open, contains complaints. You accidentally open one. It is 87 pages of one man's dissatisfaction with his neighbor's tree, addressed to 6 different officials, and ultimately ending in a command to let the wind decide. You return it to black ribbon status. By late afternoon, you've developed a sort of archive vision. You can now identify dates by parchment hue alone. The ones from Leo VI's reign are a soft brown, the ones from Basil II are somehow sticky, and no one touches the scrolls from Nikephoros II without gloves. You sit back, fingers dusted with history, and breathe in the silence. The walls don't echo. They absorb. And as the sun leans across the doorway, you think, no matter what else collapsed, these shelves held firm. And maybe they always will. Section 3. You wake up with ink on your cheek and a vague memory of dreaming in Greek. Not fluent Greek, more like bureaucratic Greek, the kind where verbs are footnoted and every noun requires approval from 3 departments. The dream might have been about filing a tax receipt for a goat you never owned. Today is no special day in the Byzantine civil service, which is exactly why it's perfect. You rise, dress, and walk down the corridor toward the scribe's hall. There are no bells, no announcements, just the low murmur of sandals and coughs, the occasional sneeze echoing through marble. A fresh pot of ink sits on the central table, smoky and fragrant, tinged with vinegar to keep the mold out. You help yourself. Your desk has not moved. Your chair still creaks. The wax tablet you left half-written yesterday is exactly where it was, still warm with procrastination. The scroll beside it reads, "Copy in triplicate, to be reviewed before the feast of St. Euthymio's." You make a note to look up when that is. You won't. Today's task, transcribe a land ownership dispute between 2 brothers near the theme of Thrace. The argument concerns a fig tree, a goat, and whether a stone wall was moved 2 palms to the left during the emperor's fast. As you read, you can't help but admire the bureaucratic precision. The location of each fruit tree is mapped in steps from a local well. The goat is named Heraclean. The wall is described with a level of detail you'd expect from a mason, not a farmer. The brothers each signed their statements with trembling hands, under the watchful eye of a local judge who appended the phrase, "I did not fall asleep during this hearing." You smile. Relate. You begin to copy. Your pen strokes are steady, almost musical. Copying isn't glamorous, but it is satisfying. The ink dries before you finish the next line. You add the emperor's seal in the designated blank, except, being a minor functionary, your seal isn't the emperor's at all, but a small fish motif denoting non-binding copy. Still, you press it proudly. Someone sneezes across the room. "Health to you," you murmur. A clerk near the window groans. He's been working on the same boundary dispute for 6 weeks, only to discover that the village involved no longer exists. "Erased by an earthquake," he mutters. "Or possibly taxes." You nod solemnly. Same difference. By mid-morning, you're summoned to assist in drafting a response to an imperial inquiry about parchment shortages. The letter you're copying into neat lines reads, "To the most esteemed keeper of the imperial supply of writing materials, may your quills remain sharp forever. We submit that, due to the overuse of goats for clothing, feasts, and festivals, we are in receipt of insufficient skins to meet the demands of documenting our empire's many glorious receipts." You take your time with this one. It's funnier when written beautifully. Historians still argue whether the Byzantine bureaucracy was efficient or simply endless. Some claim it preserved the empire through chaos by outpapering its enemies. Others say it collapsed under its own scrolls. But inside the chancery, you don't think in centuries. You think in lines. You take a break for a modest lunch, cold chickpeas, dried figs, and a sip of watered wine. You eat while reading over a memo requesting additional sand for ink blotting. It includes a footnote about the dangers of excessive dryness leading to crumbling margins. Bureaucratic drama. By late afternoon, you've finished 2 full scrolls and a wax tablet and have been thanked precisely 0 times. You don't mind. The work is quiet, reliable. You know where each word goes, where each seal sits. It's an empire of order, even if the emperor doesn't know your name. You return your pen to its pouch, tidy your parchment stack, and whisper to the room, "May we all be copied correctly." The walls don't answer, but you think they heard you. Section 4. You step into a hallway, so long it echoes your footsteps twice. Welcome to the Bucolian Wing, a stretch of the Great Palace most known for its sheer number of doors, few of which open the same way twice. You've been tasked with retrieving a sealed letter from the Office of Maritime Warehousing, somewhere just past the blue door that used to be red. Very helpful. The Bucolian Wing is technically still part of the palace, though it feels more like a maze designed by someone with a grudge against logic. The walls are lined with faded mosaics, many featuring owls holding scrolls or monks pointing sternly at baskets of grain. There's an office rumored to have one stored only wheat tally sheets. Another is sealed shut for papal reasons. No one opens that one. You pass 10 doors. Behind each, a scene of sublime mundanity. Door 1, a clerk napping beneath a tower of pigeon scrolls. Door 3, 2 men arguing about the size of an amphora based on shadows. Door 5, a room entirely filled with string. For filing. Or worship. Unclear. Door 7, a table of tax inspectors measuring beans with terrifying precision. Door 8 locked. Marked Department of Archival Smells. You decline. You try door 11. Success. Inside, the Office of Maritime Warehousing, or so the nameplate claims. It's actually 3 desks, 7 scrolls, and 1 parrot. A man named Soterios greets you with the sigh of someone who's been tracking olive oil shipments since the age of Constantine. He gestures toward a shelf labeled naval forms, slightly wet. You're handed a scroll sealed with blue wax. You're told, in no uncertain terms, to walk back slowly. Last time, the courier jogged. The wax cracked. Chaos ensued. You nod. As you retrace your steps, the hall seems longer. Someone has moved a tapestry. You get turned around near the Department of Metric Disputes, then again by the door of unknown keys. Finally, you return, only to discover you've brought the wrong scroll. This one is labeled Bean Inventory, Alexandria. You consider crying. Instead, you go back. Historians still argue whether the Bucolian Wing was truly functional or simply ceremonial. Some records suggest that only half its offices served any administrative purpose, the rest existed to confuse ambassadors. You can believe that. One legend claims a Byzantine emperor once got lost in here for 3 hours and emerged with a new decree about hallway width. Eventually, you find the correct scroll. Soterios apologizes and hands you a second one for your trouble. It's a naval biscuit requisition form. You treasure it anyway. You make your way back, slower this time, ducking past a priest who's lost his own office, and a cat carrying what looks like a receipt in its mouth. The cat does not stop. You deliver the scroll. Your superior glances at the seal, nods, and sets it aside. No one thanks you. Of course. But later, as you sip your watered wine and listen to the sea breeze fluttering the edges of a shelf of edicts, you smile. Not because the scroll mattered, but because you didn't get lost. Much. And in the Byzantine world, that's as good as glory. Section 5. You're sitting at your desk, staring at a title so long it wraps onto a second line of parchment. It reads, Notice from the Sacred and Most Rational Office of Agricultural Census and Regional Herd Verification, under the blessing of the Divine Court of Imperial Logothetes, by order of the Right Cushion Chamberlain. You haven't even reached the actual message yet. Today, you'll discover how the Byzantines turned paperwork into poetry and bureaucracy into its own deeply complicated art form. First, let's talk signatures. In most places, you'd sign your name and be done. But not here. Here, signatures are miniature artworks, often with a small illustration, a ceremonial phrase, and at least one intentionally ambiguous flourish, just in case you want to deny authorship later. You try practicing one now. Yours is supposed to say, faithfully submitted in the service of the word and grain. You add a tiny drawing of a quill balanced on a sheaf of wheat. Whether anyone else notices is uncertain, but it pleases you. Then there's the margins. Margins are sacred. You must not write outside them, but you may write within them, only if you're adding commentary, corrections, or authorized shade. A common marginal note reads, as previously stated by my more learned predecessor, who was clearly ignored. You make a note to use that one soon. Next comes punctuation, a danger zone. One misplaced breath mark or accent, and your entire clause might suggest you're accusing the emperor of illiteracy. This happened once. The culprit was demoted to the Department of Brick Storage, where he now writes annual reports on mortar. Historians still argue whether Byzantine bureaucratic language was intended to clarify or confuse. Some say it was a way of protecting meaning, wrapping important orders in layers of reverence. Others argue it was self-preservation. If your work took 3 hours to read, no one could blame you for being misunderstood. Then there's the ink itself. In high offices, gold ink was reserved for imperial replies. Red ink was used for danger, such as tax delinquents or collapsing aqueducts. Blue ink was rare and imported, often used for titles or to impress foreign visitors. Today, you get brown ink. It smells faintly of raisins and compromise. You spend your morning copying a speech written by a mid-level functionary for a new governor. It contains 43 separate metaphors for harvest and at least one accidental mention of wheat behaving improperly. You're unsure whether to flag this. Your colleague, Eupraxia, leans over. That phrase again, she asks. Didn't someone nearly cause a grain riot in Cappadocia with it? You nod. Allegedly. After lunch, figs, cheese, olives, you're assigned to review imperial titles for an upcoming procession. The list includes Logothete of the Sea Letters, Keeper of the Leftward Tithes, Subdeacon of the Fish Salts, Notary to the Unbuttoned Accounts, Ink Steward, Minor Wing. You whisper each one like a chant. You feel yourself slipping into a state of bureaucratic bliss. In the afternoon, you sit in on a drafting session for a new tax decree. 10 clerks, 1 paragraph, 3 hours. The final sentence begins, in acknowledgement of the burdens carried with grace by our lesser communities, especially those who maintain the sacred vineyards and bean fields with fewer than 3 beasts of burden per family group. It goes on, and on, and on. You copy it, slowly, beautifully. By twilight, your hand aches, but your heart is strangely full. Because here, in this paper palace, language is not fast. It's careful. It curls and turns and loops, not to waste time, but to show that time itself is respected. You seal the scroll. You sigh. And in that long exhale, you hear history whisper. You've done your part. Section 6. The scribe's room is unusually tense this morning. Quills are tapping faster than usual, scrolls being unrolled with a bit too much force, and someone, definitely Theodolos, just muttered something unrepeatable in medieval Greek. You take your seat cautiously. Welcome to the underacknowledged battlefield of the Byzantine world, the passive-aggressive, ink-stained realm of bureaucratic rivalries. It starts innocently. A misplaced comma in yesterday's grain report. Or was it a dash? Either way, it changed the meaning from send barley south to send barley inside south, which led to an overharvest, which led to complaints, which landed, somehow, at your department. And someone, not naming names, but it rhymes with Theodolos, is blaming you. You receive a memo, folded unusually, a known sign of displeasure. Inside it reads, kindly recall the imperial preference for precision in conjunctions. May your ink remain clear. You respond with a memo of your own. Of course, as always, I rely upon my colleagues' clarity, particularly those seated near the window. Eupraxia reads both. You two need a hobby, she says, without looking up. Bureaucratic squabbles are rarely loud. Instead, they're coded in the placement of paperweights, the borrowing and not returning of styluses, or in the selective sharing of superior parchment. Someone swapped your ink with a batch that smells faintly of fermented turnip. You pretend not to notice. Historians still argue whether these rivalries were petty or integral to maintaining order. Some scholars suggest that Byzantine bureaucracy functioned like a self-correcting organism, rife with internal competition that kept everyone too busy bickering to stage a coup. Others just think people got really, really bored. You witness a moment of true sabotage at mid-morning. A clerk replaces a seal stamp with one that says draft in very tiny letters. A shipment authorization is issued. 2 days later, the goats arrive in the wrong province, and the original scribe innocently points to the corner, you see? Clearly marked as a draft. No one is punished. Everyone takes notes. There are even fashion-based feuds. Today, Theodolos wears a sash that suggests he's due for promotion. Eupraxia rolls her eyes and sharpens her quill audibly. You remain neutral, wearing your standard ink-smudged robe and an expression of calm confusion. You break the tension with an offering, almonds soaked in honey, placed on the shared snack table. It works. For a while. Theodolos nods. Eupraxia shares a copy of the updated parchment cutting ratios. Peace, if temporary, is restored. But by late afternoon, the accidental swapping of filing shelves has begun. You find your meticulously arranged pigeonhole labeled under Miscellaneous the Horror. You sigh, straighten the scrolls, and leave a small drawing of a goose wearing a laurel crown. It's childish. It's beneath you. It's perfect. You end the day refilling your ink pot and humming a hymn from the chapel next door. Outside, Constantinople continues to bustle, soldiers patrol, merchants shout, priests chant. Inside, in your parchment-lined corner, the greatest war of all unfolds quietly, the battle of punctuation, propriety, and passive aggression. And despite everything, you wouldn't have it any other way. Section 7. You arrive this morning to find 3 small scrolls, 1 broken seal, and a bowl of lentils someone definitely spilled in protest. Today, it's all about taxes. Specifically, taxes on things that barely make sense, like goat bells and seasonal shadow use. Welcome to the Byzantine fiscal machine, where taxation is a language, a logic, and a slow-moving form of national endurance. You're assigned to process tithe reports from the theme of Opsikion, a region known mostly for sending olives and complaints. The first scroll reads, by the mercy of God and in the 2nd year of favorable rain, we submit payment in the form of 4 sacks of barley, 2 jars of goat milk, and 1 rug that may or may not contain fleas. You nod. Pretty standard. Each tax entry must be recorded on a wax tablet, cross-referenced with previous scrolls, and then rewritten by hand onto parchment to be archived, unless it concerns poultry, in which case it also goes to the Office of Feathered Property. You do not question this. You watch a clerk next to you spend 15 minutes measuring the precise value of a sheep-dyed cloak based on how firmly it smells of labor. He makes 3 notes, sighs dramatically, then eats a fig. You ask Eupraxia what the weirdest tithe she's ever filed was. She doesn't hesitate. 3 live peacocks and a well-behaved dog. She pauses. The dog was later reassessed as moderately helpful. Historians still argue whether the Byzantine tax system was genius or madness. On one hand, it was incredibly thorough. On the other, it once taxed theoretical crop shadows in regions experiencing a drought. You believe both can be true. At midday, a memo arrives from a coastal village claiming their annual grain tithe was washed away by excessive moon behavior. You note it down. You help a junior clerk file documents related to intermittent harvest noise complaints, which involve small fines, longer fines, and eventually mandatory quiet time scrolls. You carefully transcribe one. To the farmer whose geese shouted past dusk, be advised that the empire observes boundaries both geographic and acoustic. The scroll is beautiful. It smells faintly of time and bureaucracy. Later, you're sent to the Office of Storage Validation to confirm whether the barley sacks listed on 3 reports actually exist. You find 2 of them. The third has been repurposed into a bench. A note is attached. Barley now supports contemplation. You approve it. The last task of the day is helping draft a policy clarifying how many bean-related tax exemptions can be claimed per household. The draft includes the phrase, "Only 1 exceptional bean per domicile shall be weighed without suspicion." You suggest adding, "unless blessed." It is approved unanimously. As evening falls, you look over the day's yield. 12 scrolls copied, 3 wax tablets updated, and 1 tax form where someone had drawn a chicken in the margin with surprising emotional depth. You pack your things. On the way out, you pass the complaint scroll shelf. You add one about quill shortages, carefully and signed. Because in this empire, nothing moves without paper, and everything begins with a form. Section 8. You're summoned to a room no one ever wants to visit, tucked behind the chapel of holy deductions, and just adjacent to the courtyard where pigeons go to squabble over breadcrumbs. Today, you've been assigned to the calendar office, specifically to assist the imperial calendar clerk. This man is, by all appearances, ancient. He wears 6 robes, 3 pairs of glasses, 1 for each season, and speaks exclusively in murmurs and finger taps. His name is Gerasimos, and he has been counting Tuesdays since the reign of Romano's Eye. Your task: ensure the emperor's personal schedule aligns with the lunar cycle, feast days, diplomatic arrivals, and the availability of barley-based refreshments. Failure to count correctly may result in the emperor missing his name day, which could destabilize the entire grain tariff cycle. You begin by reviewing the current month, Faminoth, though it's also possibly Pharmath, depending on which bishop is consulted. The moon is in its uncertain gibbous, which complicates fasting schedules. You note this. Gerasimos hands you a scroll labeled Partial Lunations and Optional Saints. He gestures to a footnote marked with 3 stars. It reads, "If St. Thalassios falls on a Thursday, and no one dreams of fish, cancel procession." You nod like this makes sense. The Byzantine calendar is a masterpiece of overlapping systems. There's the solar cycle, the Julian model, the ecclesiastical calendar, and then there are the anniversaries of obscure miracles, imperial victories, and one incident where a goat was reportedly healed by proximity to an icon. Every event must be weighed for importance. Today, you must determine if the Feast of the 40 Martyrs takes precedence over the commemoration of the 12th century jellyfish bloom in the Sea of Marmara. Gerasimos says, "Depends on the wind." You write that down. Historians still argue how centralized the calendar system truly was. Some believe each region adapted it with generous local additions. Others suggest there was an official date czar who ruled over holiday hierarchies with an iron stylus. Either way, you now understand why half the empire was always late. Midday, Gerasimos takes a nap. You continue decoding symbols on the scroll of confirmed anniversaries. There's one shaped like a fish, another like a spoon, and one that might be a donkey in distress. You're instructed to ignore that one unless the stars align. You're briefly interrupted by an envoy demanding to know when the emperor can receive a gift from Venice. You consult 4 scrolls, 3 tide tables, and a jar of pebbles Gerasimos uses as a lunar abacus. Next Friday, you say, "unless the basil wilts." He nods. This is acceptable. By afternoon, your head is spinning. Dates aren't just numbers. They're a dance of theology, astrology, and pure administrative muscle. You write, move bean inspection to Thursday unless shadow falls on wrong goose. It makes you feel powerful. At the end of the day, Gerasimos opens a chest and shows you the most sacred item in the office, the Imperial Day Planner. It's enormous, covered in gold foil, smells faintly of cardamom and regret. You don't touch it, but you bow slightly. He hands you a smaller scroll. Tomorrow, he says, we calculate leap days. You sigh, smile, and vow to dream of fish tonight, just in case. Section 9. You're summoned to the robing room. No, not to change clothes. You're fine in your dusty tunic. You're here to document a wardrobe dispute, one that has taken up 4 clerks, 2 witnesses, and the better part of a week. Because in the Byzantine Empire, what you wear doesn't just say who you are. It tells people who outranks whom, by which color, which thread count, and which number of ornamental frogs stitched on your outer sash. Today's lesson? Uniforms, and the deeply understated chaos they conceal. You meet the complainant first, an official from the Department of Vinegar Oversight, who has arrived to argue that a newly appointed notary from the Office of Maritime Parchments is wearing illegally dyed sleeves. His words, "They're blue," he hisses, "but not the right blue. That shade is designated post-Ambrosian, semi-palatine dusk, not imperial light dusk. Do you see the difference?" You nod. You do not see the difference. In a corner, a junior official mutters, "This wouldn't have happened under Theophanes." You aren't sure who Theophanes was, but you're beginning to agree. The Byzantines loved their robes. Each rank had a designated combination of colors, trims, accessories, and cuts. Some robes had patches that meant, "This man handles grain complaints." Others had gold embroidery shaped like eyes, symbolic for, yes, someone who notices things. Historians still debate whether these outfits were standardized or chaotic. Surviving manuals suggest deep consistency, but illustrations often contradict them, showing people wearing whatever they could get away with, as long as they looked vaguely official and weren't barefoot. You take notes as the dispute continues. The robe in question is examined under sunlight, firelight, and something called the onion dye test. A verdict is nearly reached until someone notices the accused's sash bears 3 silver beads. The room gasps. 3 beads is for the senior parchment rank, someone whispers. He's junior. The notary is flustered. "They're heirloom beads," he stammers. "From my uncle. Decorative only." Eupraxia leans in. He's doomed. You record everything on a wax tablet that already contains 2 memos about previous robe-related offenses. Your favorite reads, "Epicurnes tea, wore sash during fast. Unseasonal. Noted." The robing steward is summoned. He arrives in a blinding green robe with gold thread cuffs and a feather in his cap made of real quill, symbol of office. He examines the robe like a relic, declares it borderline. Everyone sighs. The accused is allowed to keep his job, but must wear a neutral tone scarf for 2 weeks as penance. As the room clears, a junior clerk whispers, "At least he didn't wear boots." You glance down. Half the room is barefoot. Tradition. You return to your desk with a new respect for drapery politics. You draft your own robe guide. Green equals logistics. Red equals high clerical or dangerous confidence. Blue equals either important or confused. Beige equals avoid eye contact. Yellow equals someone's niece, probably. Later, you help write a scroll updating wardrobe protocol for the upcoming imperial inspection. It reads, in part, "All staff to don proper hue of sobriety, and one sanctioned embellishment unless otherwise dead." You seal it, file it, smile, and think, in an empire ruled by robes, sometimes the threads hold everything together. Section 10. The scroll you're handed today is a marvel of absurdity. It begins with a bow, detours through 3 salutations, includes the phrase, "by the unknowable grace of cedar-scented justice," and only after 212 words does it mention the subject. A goat tax refund, and it's signed with a title that wraps around the scroll like a decorative ribbon. It reads, "Humbly transmitted by the most reflective, modestly elevated logothete of Inland Revenue, Lord of Secondary Grain Counts, and Associate Deputy of the Fiscal River Patrol." You blink, then blink again. Today, You are learning to survive a workday in a world where job titles could sink a boat if engraved on marble. You begin cataloging recent personnel memos. Each one is a litany of flourishes. Here are some highlights. Senior Inquate Custodian, Fifth Courtyard, Keeper of Quills in even numbers. Notary to the Seasonal Department of Mud-related Claims. Candlemaster of the 7th Vigil, Under Lantern Quarter. Eupraxia passes by with a stack of updates. They're adding a new title for the person who decides whether to replace worn desk mats, she says. It'll be a paid position. You nod solemnly. The empire endures. Historians still argue whether these endless titles reflected real power or if they were a grand illusion, a performance of importance wrapped in epistolary excess. Some believe they acted like social armor, deflecting blame. Others think they simply helped everyone feel a little more significant. You notice that even the cleaning staff have formal identifiers, sanitary adjuncts of the holy entryway. You consider applying. Their robes look comfortable. Midday, you're tasked with responding to a request for title clarification. A clerk named Leontios has been mistakenly addressed as subdeacon of the administrative salt, when he is in fact salt clerk retired. You pen an apology, including 3 honorifics and a drawing of a basil leaf. It's deemed acceptable. You begin drafting your own title, just in case. Something modest. Maybe. Modestly attentive observer of copy scroll corrections and unintentional marginalia. It has a nice ring. Later, you're called to the Hall of Titles, a real room lined with plaques bearing the formal names of current staff. One reads, Master of Bean Enumeration Emeritus. Another, former logothete of unbaked ceremonial goods. A third is blank, but rumored to belong to someone so important no one dares write it. You leave a note on that one just for fun. Possibly me. As the sun lowers, you file your final scroll under Titles, Exceeding Reason. You stretch your legs, sore from a day of reading job descriptions that may have never actually existed. And yet, every one of them made someone sit straighter. Estantalle. You return to your desk, adjust your inkstand, and sign off the day's log with an improvised honorific, faithfully submitted by the afternoon steward of quiet exhalations. Because in Byzantium, even boredom deserves a title. Section 11. The smell of wax fills the air. Not incense or candle wax, but official seal wax, thick, smoky, and lightly perfumed with authority. You're summoned to the Central Records Chamber today, where a shipment of memos from the military quarter has just arrived. The scrolls are still warm from the sun, but cold in tone. Today's task? Reviewing how memos moved empires. You're seated beside Eupraxia, who holds up a scroll sealed in the distinctive copper-toned wax of the Eastern logothete. Urgent, she says, which means we have a week. She cracks it open with the back of her stylus, careful not to tear the parchment. Inside, a request for troop movement approval. You'd think this would involve maps, orders, perhaps a list of supplies. But no. The first paragraph is about how the ink shortage in Charjanan is affecting morale. The second details the unreasonably aggressive behavior of a provincial goat. The third, and only relevant section, asks whether 45 soldiers can be transferred to assist in melon protection patrols. You mark it for review. In Byzantium, nothing of consequence happens without paperwork. Troop deployments, fortress repairs, boat refits. Every action must be preceded by at least 3 scrolls, a clerical notation, and a stamp from someone with a name like Under Adjutant of Naval Vellum Affairs. Historians still argue how these systems manage to function at all. Some credit the clerks themselves, diligent, precise, and deeply caffeinated on whatever herbal stimulant passed for coffee. Others say it was pure momentum, a bureaucratic engine running on its own self-invented logic. You see both sides. One scroll you open is written entirely in verse, a poetic plea to transfer a cavalry unit from Iconium due to excessive dryness of spirit and soil. It's signed, sincerely, by a captain named Anthemos. You admire the line, "Let hooves fly where olives no longer gleam." You vote to approve it. Eupraxia rolls her eyes. In a nearby pile is a dispatch from the theme of Thracian, alerting Constantinople to a band of raiders, possibly Norman, possibly bored. The reply, "Request noted. Please submit bandit silhouette for identification." You help copy the reply. It takes 2 scrolls, a new ribbon, and a drawing of a shield with the word, maybe, scrawled across it. The most important scroll of the day is sealed with crimson wax, the Emperor's own. It's a counterorder. It reverses an earlier reversal of a grain convoy's delay. You read it 5 times and still aren't sure what's being ordered. Eupraxia shrugs. We send grain and don't ask questions. The afternoon passes in a blur of opening, reading, recopying, resealing. You realize the entire empire might be run not by generals or priests, but by tired scribes making judgment calls based on handwriting. A final scroll arrives just before sunset. It's old, torn at the edges. Its seal bears the double eagle, faint but still proud. Inside, a decree from decades ago authorizing the construction of a road that was never built. Someone found it in a file labeled Miscellaneous Delays. You copy it anyway, because maybe, someday, someone will build that road. And they'll say, the Empire remembered. Section 12. The scroll lands on your desk with an audible thump. Not because it's thick, though it is, but because it's wrapped in something heavy. You peel away the outer cloth and find what looks like a scrap of waxed linen tucked between the folds. Inside, nothing but a list. Names, weights, and quantities. It seems harmless, but Eupraxia leans over and whispers, that's contraband. Today, you enter the underground world of the Byzantine stationery trade. It begins innocently enough, a shortage of parchment in the Department of Maritime Accounts. Too many ledgers, not enough goatskins. Requests for resupply have gone unanswered for weeks. So now, whispers flutter down the marble halls. See the man with the ink blot on his boot. He knows someone. You're sent to the East Corridor, past the Chapel of Holy Accountants, to find a clerk named Nicetas. He sits by a shelf labeled, heretical pamphlets, unsorted, and quietly offers you a deal. 2 scrolls, good parchment, real parchment, from Cappadocia. I'll take a small tin of lampblack and 3 wax candles. You accept. This isn't a black market. It's more like a shadow market. A parallel empire of quiet trades and soft footsteps, all trying to keep the ink flowing. Everyone needs supplies. Sand for blotting, styluses with the right curve, and wax that doesn't smell like sheep soup. You return to your desk with the parchment tucked beneath your robe. Eupraxia nods her approval and hands you a gold-sealed document, an inventory of theft-missing stationery that may or may not list the scroll you're currently writing on. Historians still argue how widespread stationery theft was. Some say it was rare and punished severely. Others believe it was so common that entire offices unofficially budgeted for losses due to borrowing. You believe the latter. By midday, the supply tension escalates. The Office of Inland Revenue has run out of red ink and is borrowing ox blood from the apothecary, resulting in letters that now smell like policy and regret. Meanwhile, a junior scribe is caught swapping imperial parchment for old shipping manifests. Vintage scrolls, he explains. They copy better. At the Office of Edict Retention, someone has taken to shaving old scrolls clean and writing over them. A palimpsest, except one erased document bleeds through in the margins. A love letter to a courtier named Zosimos. It is signed yours, ink-stained. You keep that one. Late afternoon, you're approached by a girl no older than 12, carrying a reed basket. Inside, 6 tiny pots of indigo ink, smuggled clearly. 1 jar for 2 copies of my cousin's promotion, she says. He's shy. You nod. Deal. You end the day by swapping one of your older quills for a stylus carved with initials you don't recognize. It writes beautifully. You sign off the day's ledgers with extra flourish. And then, quietly, you light a candle, one of the nice ones, and label your drawer not with your name, but with a sigil made from the Greek letters for ink and air. Because here, in the shadowy corridors of legitimate authority, everyone needs a little secret shimmer, especially when the empire runs on parchment. Section 13. You're barely through the door this morning when Eupraxia corners you with a look of scandalized delight. You didn't hear, she hisses. The logothete of Western Salt misplacement got demoted. You blink. Why? She grins. He used the wrong seal on a melon shipment request. They say it had a duck on it. Today, you plunge into the real engine of Byzantine administration, gossip. It flows faster than ink, cuts sharper than styluses, and often accomplishes more than formal decrees ever could. You sit down at your desk, but nothing gets copied until you've heard the morning's full round of who misfiled what and with whom. A clerk near the archive door whispers, the assistant binder's apprentice was seen leaving the oil storeroom with unapproved parchment. Another chimes in, I heard it was 2 scrolls, and one was in Latin. You gasp, Latin? Even the senior scribe across the room, who usually speaks only in coughs, leans forward and rasps. They're reassigning scroll shells in the third hall. Eupraxia's name was left off. She shrugs. They'll fix it, or I'll fix it. Gossip in the chancery comes coded. Euphemisms abound. He's been very flexible with ink standards. She's filed under multiple categories, if you know what I mean. That robe wasn't technically ceremonial. One popular tale involves a minor functionary who once rewrote a memo to make it appear that his superior had authorized a tax break for himself. It went unnoticed for months. When discovered, he was reassigned to damp record oversight. He lasted 2 days. Historians still argue whether these office dramas had real impact. Some believe they helped expose corruption and inefficiency. Others see them as steam valves, ways for low-level clerks to feel powerful in a hierarchy designed to keep them invisible. You think it's both. By midday, a fresh scandal breaks. A love poem written in iambic Greek was found tucked inside a grain inventory ledger. The author signed it only with a seal shaped like a goose feather. Speculation explodes. Eupraxia has theories. I think it's the assistant notary for maritime overages. He has poetic wrists. You glance across the room. The assistant notary is holding a scroll with exactly the kind of flourish that suggests heartbreak. The afternoon brings a flurry of scroll traffic. Among them, a memo from the Department of Moral Rectitude reminding staff that affection is best expressed through efficiency. It's unsigned. Everyone laughs. By day's end, you've written only half your usual quota. But you've learned that someone once hid a cheese wheel behind the bean register, that a robe was improperly laundered and now smells of lavender, a power move, and that the emperor's scribe recently fainted upon discovering a marginal note critiquing his comma usage. You record none of this officially, but you file it all away, for future context, because in the Byzantine world, even silence comes annotated. And gossip? It's just another kind of footnote. Section 14. You arrive early, too early, and immediately regret it. The only others present are the candlelighters, the cleaning clerics, and one particularly intense man practicing the art of sitting very still. Today, your assignment is nebulous. Observe workflow, the note said. Eupraxia smirked. You've been volunteered for posture duty. Welcome to the art of looking busy. It's a Byzantine tradition, so sacred it might as well have its own feast day. You take your seat and begin the ritual, shuffling blank parchment, adjusting your stylus, and leaning forward just enough to suggest you're contemplating a complex theological-political grain tariff. Across the room, a man you've never seen before is scribbling furiously on what turns out to be a scrap of cheese wrapping. He's doing it with such intensity that 3 visitors stop to nod in respect. One of them might be a bishop. Another clerk has perfected the hover scroll technique, holding an open scroll just above the table, never reading it, just occasionally tilting it as though responding to some unseen instruction. It's mesmerizing. You try the quill pause, dipping your pen, then freezing as though mid-thought. Your expression should say, am I rewriting imperial doctrine or just drafting a memo about bathhouse drainage? You aim for mystery. Mid-morning, you're joined by Basilios, a notorious performance scribe. He sets down 2 scrolls, arranges them by angle of dramatic effect, and begins what appears to be calligraphic yoga. His left hand holds a prop quill, his right scrawls occasional lines of gibberish. He pauses only to sip water like it's infused with divine inspiration. You nod at him. He nods back. Mutual respect. Historians still argue whether this culture of choreographed diligence hindered or enhanced administration. Some claim it slowed processes, but others say it created a visual order, an atmosphere of quiet majesty that intimidated incompetence, or at least confused it into stillness. Lunch comes. You pretend to read an edict while balancing a fig on your stylus. Someone passes and compliments your dedication. You hum appreciatively and eat the fig. By mid-afternoon, it's clear the office has settled into its rhythms. Scrolls are being moved in careful arcs from desk to desk, most untouched, some re-rolled slightly to simulate usage. The sound of parchment shifting is constant, gentle, like rainfall on clay. You take notes on movement patterns. One clerk walks with a limp only when carrying a message. Another makes a soft clucking noise as she flips pages. It sounds productive, she explains. You experiment with small, frequent nods, occasionally whispering into your scroll. Eupraxia gives you a slow clap. Your only real task is to approve a requisition for more blotting sand. You sign it with extra flourishes, then spend 10 minutes redrying it beside the brazier. Near sunset, a visiting dignitary appears, robed in crimson, bearing questions about fish quotas. The entire office subtly lifts its posture. Scrolls are rustled, pens are dipped. One man rereads his own name out loud with conviction. The dignitary leaves impressed. You all exhale. You pack up slowly, stacking your unused parchment at slightly asymmetrical angles to suggest stress. You leave behind a crumpled memo with no text, just enough to imply effort. Outside, the stars begin to blink. And inside, the empire glows faintly with the satisfaction of looking exactly as important as it felt. Section 15. Winter has arrived in Constantinople, not with blizzards or icicles, but with a slow, creeping chill that seeps into the stones of the chancery and transforms every ink bottle into a reluctant puddle of frozen syrup. Today, the ink is half solid, the wax is brittle, and your fingers feel like twigs. Welcome to the coldest corner of the Byzantine Empire, the scribe's wing in February. You arrive to find the office wrapped in layers, literally, robes over tunics over shawls. Someone has brought in a brazier, which crackles hopefully but provides the warmth of a bored candle. Eupraxia sits with her hands tucked under her thighs. It's too cold to feud, she mumbles. You try to sharpen your quill, but your fingers refuse. Instead, you cup your hands over your ink pot and whisper kind things to it. It does not thaw. The office begins its morning rituals, but with added groans and breath huffs. A clerk near the window ties rags around his sandals. Another is writing using only his left hand, because the right one froze mid-sentence yesterday. You do your best. A scroll arrives from the Office of Agricultural Complaints. It is stiff, the seal cracked from the cold. It reads, "Beans frozen solid. Blame assigned to insufficient prayers for warmth. Please advise." You write back. Recommend warming prayers in larger fonts, possibly near a brazier. It's approved. By mid-morning, you and Eupraxia are fighting over the foot warmer, a clay pot filled with coals, passed around like a sacred relic. She wins, but lets you place your elbows near it as a gesture of professional camaraderie. The ink situation worsens. Someone resorts to carving their notes into wax tablets with a pin, while another tries warming their quill by sticking it down their robe. Results vary. Historians still debate how Byzantines coped with cold. Some believe palace corridors were heated by steam or clever ventilation systems. Others argue most administrative offices were left to shiver in stoic silence, relying on layering and passive-aggressive commentary. You side with the latter. A minor scandal erupts after lunch when a junior clerk is found hoarding candle stubs. He claims it's for illumination, but everyone knows it's for warmth. He's sentenced to read last year's barley reports aloud until spring. No one protests. You consider wrapping yourself in scrolls. They're thick, insulating. Someone once did it during the frost of 978. He was fined, but famously toasty. The sun sets earlier now. The room glows orange with lamplight and frost. You copy a short decree about dock fees, mostly just to keep your hands moving. The wax you seal it with cracks, then crumbles. You try again. This time it holds. You end the day beneath 3 cloaks, sipping hot broth from a shared cup and listening to someone humming a hymn about Saint Eudokia, patroness of midwinter murmuring. You sigh, your breath a tiny cloud. Outside, snow falls on the rooftops. Inside, the empire survives, not with fire, but with stubborn fingers and shared coals. And the soft scratch of quills that never stop. Section 16. The scent of cinnamon is strong today, sweet and sharp, threading through the chancery like incense on a festival morning. You follow your nose past 3 disinterested clerks and a sleeping official with a quill balanced on his ear until you reach the side room. There, seated beneath a fresco of Saint Basil holding a ledger, is a foreign ambassador from Venice. He smells like clove, orange peel, and mild panic. Today, you're watching diplomacy unfold through the medium of parchment and the terror of misspelled names. The ambassador is here to present gifts. Technically, he's also here to renew trade rights for olive oil, glass, and something described on the shipping log as nautical confidence. But before any of that happens, his documents must be processed, copied, filed, rendered in the most florid Greek imaginable. You are summoned to help translate and transcribe. The Venetian's letter begins with, "To the glorious, unshakable, rightly guided emperor of all Christian realms." So far, so good. Then you spot the disaster. He's written the emperor's name as Michaelis instead of Michael. The suffix is Latin. The horror. You look up. So does Eupraxia. She sees it too. The air freezes. Historians still debate whether minor spelling errors ever derailed diplomacy. Some say officials ignored such things in the name of trade. Others insist one badly rendered vowel once delayed a treaty with Aleppo by 5 years. Today, the room votes for panic. You carefully copy the letter, pausing at the misspelling. You do not correct it. That would imply deceit. You do not highlight it. That would imply insult. Instead, you add a marginal note in microscopic script. This is how they spell it. Not our fault. The ambassador smiles nervously, offers figs. You take 2. By midday, 3 interpreters are arguing about the phrasing of mutual friendship versus reciprocally sincere neighborliness. Someone throws a scroll. The ambassador flinches. You sip broth and keep copying. Then comes the seal crisis. The Venetian letter is stamped with a lion, St. Mark's lion, to be precise, but it's looking slightly sideways, which in some circles implies distrust. The official responsible for scroll aesthetics gasps audibly. "A glancing lion," she hisses. "Is this a challenge?" You draw a small hat on the lion in your copy. It helps. Eventually, the matter is resolved with a gift of honeyed almonds and a verbal assurance that the lion merely squints when the light is strong. The letter is filed. The ambassador is permitted to stay another 3 days, during which he may not visit the treasury, but may visit the icon of St. Alexios as often as he pleases. You file a scroll under diplomatic events scented. Later, Eupraxia admits she once saw a scribe dismissed for miswriting the title Basilius of the Romans as Basilisk of the Rooms. You laugh. You believe her. You finish the day with ink-stained fingers, a mild headache, and an appreciation for the power of punctuation. Because in Byzantium, alliances were sealed not just with gifts or gold, but with perfectly looped letters and a lion who didn't squint too hard. Section 17. You are seated in the smallest office you've ever seen. No window, 1 stool, and a shelf of scrolls labeled questionable saints and other personnel. In the center of the room stands a candle, not lit for light, but for reverence. It flickers in front of a painted wooden icon. An old man seated at a desk, quill in hand, eyes closed in eternal paperwork. Today you meet the quietest figures in Byzantine memory, the bureaucrat saints. You'd heard of them before, rumors whispered between scroll cases and mentioned in footnotes too humble for theological councils. But here, inside the archives of peripheral holiness, their stories live on in parchment and prayer. First is Saint Philomelos the Ledyard, who, according to legend, transcribed an entire treasury record in a single night using only the wax from his own candle and the memory of angelic numbers whispered in a dream. It is said he died mid-seal, fingers still curled around the stamp. Next, you read of ISF the Marginal, famed not for his main texts, but for his commentary, spiritual insights scribbled in the sides of court tax orders. One note reads, "All grain returns unto God eventually." His relics include a blotter stained with holy oil and ink. Then there is Cashin the Indexer, a woman of such filing precision that she was believed to discern gods while through the placement of scrolls. Her system of color-coded ribbons is still whispered about in the more organized wings of the chancery. Historians still debate the legitimacy of these saints. Were they ever canonized? Were their tales invented by overworked scribes yearning for inspiration? But here, Holding a scroll bearing the faint scent of myrrh and vinegar ink, you understand that sanctity sometimes clings to the quietest tasks. You help recopy a faded Vita, a life story of Theodoros the Tireless, a clerk who transcribed all 4 Gospels from memory after the originals were eaten by mice. His feast day, observed only by the most devoted archivists, is celebrated with silence and a perfectly aligned stack of scrolls. Later, a priest arrives to bless the candle and leaves behind a bag of walnuts and figs. He would have liked these. The priest says of St. Philomelos, "You eat one," feeling strangely moved. By late afternoon, you're assigned to carry 3 scrolls, each a hagiography, to the Department of Liturgical Errors for cross-referencing. You walk slowly, carefully. You've never felt such reverence for handwriting. And when you place the scrolls on the table, the light from the window catches the gold lettering just right. It doesn't glow. It rests. Quietly. Firmly. As if to say, in a world of crumbling borders, flickering dynasties, and forgotten emperors, someone who filed forms well still matters. Section 18. You're handed a scroll this morning with a broken seal and a faint smell of rosewater. It's a promotion list, long, curling, and likely irrelevant. Still, it means you'll spend the day observing how Byzantium promotes people in the grand tradition of not promoting anyone at all. Welcome to the Byzantine ladder, short, crooked, and often leading back to your own desk. The scroll begins with flourishes. Let it be known that the most modestly elevated cleric of grain tithes, 4th rank, shall henceforth be recognized as clerk advising toward the rearguard registry, junior, with the right to sit closer to the brazier. It's the same job, different sash. You glance across the room at the newly promoted man. He's smiling faintly, adjusting his sleeve with the air of someone who's just been granted a ceremonial fig. You ask Eupraxia how often real promotions happen. She smirks. Twice a decade. Once if someone dies. Twice if someone forgets they already promoted you last year. Most titles in your wing are ornamental. Sub-editor of repeating scrolls. Ink supervisor, Dust Division. Executive keeper of backup copies, non-military. You once knew a man who held 3 simultaneous honorary titles and still delivered ink bottles every afternoon. Historians still debate whether the Byzantine promotion system was brilliantly stable or maddeningly inert. Some suggest it preserved knowledge by keeping experienced clerks in place. Others argue it created a paper-thick ceiling that nobody could read their way through. You suspect it did both. Midday, the Department of Administrative Shadows announces a new elevation. The recipient gets to wear a belt with an extra tassel. The tassel is gray, which denotes unofficial gratitude. You record this in the personnel scroll. Later, a man named Timon brags about having been considered for a vacant post in the Office of Decrees and Lent. They said I have the face of a man who understands wool. No one knows what that means, but he repeats it twice. You're asked to draft a congratulatory scroll. You use the standard format. Blessings upon the elevation of insert title. May their hand remain steady, their seal unbroken, and their robe wrinkle-free in times of drought. You also include a doodle of a dove. It's optional, but elegant. One clerk claims she was promoted once but forgot, since the title involved an abbreviation nobody understood. She's been filing under both names since. You examine your own record. It simply reads, Clerc, familiar. You add a small plus beside it, just in case. As the day ends, you see the promoted man sweeping under his desk. He whistles. His new sash flutters slightly. The sun catches its threadbare edge, and for a second, he looks content. Because here, even imagined elevation is enough. The scroll gets filed, the candle is snuffed, and you, unofficially, promote yourself to evening copy steward. No one objects. Section 19. It begins with a cough. Not a loud one, just a soft throat clear from across the room. You glance up. Theodolos glances back. He nods. You nod. Eupraxia raises one eyebrow. A message has been sent. Today, you uncover the subtle, whispered art of the desk-sitter's secret code. The informal language of tiny gestures, folded notes, and strategic silences that allows an entire office to function without saying anything aloud. You start your morning with a folded corner on your parchment. It's not an accident. It means, do not file this yet. 2 corners folded means urgent but unapproved. 3 corners? Burn this. You quietly unfold one corner. Just in case, you spot a small blot of ink on the edge of a ledger from the Office of Grain Ratios. Not a mistake. It's shaped like a dot beside the name Menedoros. It means Menedoros has been unreliable. Possibly because of the thing with the goat receipts. Eupraxia slides a scroll into your pigeonhole upside down. You know what it means. Read this when no one's watching. You do. It's a memo about parchment theft disguised as a tribute to St. Gerasimos. Very subtle. Historians still argue whether this kind of unofficial communication system existed. Few documents mention it, but countless scrolls bear tiny marks, shapes in the margins, tiny symbols, even small illustrations, likely added to convey messages without violating protocol. Some even suspect there was an internal code taught only to clerks trusted with silence. Midday, you're past a wax tablet with a message written in mirror script. You flip it, squint, and read. Beans arriving early. Do not act surprised. Later, Theodulos coughs again. This time twice. You glance at the window. A man outside is wearing a yellow sash, unofficial sign of a surprise inspection. You spread your scrolls out, sit straighter, and begin humming. Eupraxia taps her quill 3 times. It means I told you. There are also posture signals. Quill in left hand. Ask later. Scroll placed vertically. I'm not actually working. Wax seal facing outward. Need second eyes. Robe slightly unbelted. I'm done. Pretending otherwise. You follow protocol. Unfasten your robe, just slightly. Let it breathe. Someone slides a fig across your desk. No note. Just the fruit. It's a gesture of thanks, likely in response to yesterday's accidental annotation that excused them from double copying a scroll. You nod. Eat the figure. Ritual complete. By sunset, you've written 2 scrolls, stamped 4, and communicated more than most senators do in a speech. None of it will be recorded. All of it matters. You end the day by folding your memo in the style of I might revisit this. It's meaningless, but comforting. A quiet symbol that you were here and paying attention. Because in the Byzantine office, not every message needs a seal. Some are whispered in the rustle of parchment, and some are simply understood. Section 20. There's a thud as someone drops a scroll, so large it briefly rolls across the floor and knocks over a candle. No fire, just a mild rebuke from the candle's steward, and the scroll, tied with a ribbon the color of cooked lentils, is placed reverently at the head of a table. Today, you attend a meeting. A real one. Not a whisper circle or a robe-coated hallway nod fest, but an official gathering, the Council of Weights, Measures, and Quill Quality. The agenda is long. You take your seat on the stone bench between Eupraxia, who has brought snacks, and Theodulos, who has brought a pillow. There are 10 people, 7 candles, and 1 owl carved into the meeting table for wisdom. Or intimidation. No one knows. The chair opens with the phrase, "Let this commence with the balance of all balances." A scribe records that phrase 3 times. Just to be sure. The first topic, millet scoop standardization. There is debate about whether the current scoops, fashioned during the reign of Leo VI, are too generous. Someone proposes shortening them by half a thumbnail's width. Someone else gasps. Blasphemy, he whispers. That's nearly 2 lentils of discrepancy. Discussion ensues. It is vigorous. Civil, slightly sleepy. Next, an issue with quill imports. Apparently, several recent shipments have included duck feathers mistaken for goose, leading to subtle variations in line weight. The Department of Stylus Affairs insists it's manageable. The Ministry of Margins says it threatens legibility. You're asked to weigh in. You say, I have no strong feeling about ducks. The room nods, as if you've uttered something profound. Historians still argue whether these meetings had impact or were ceremonial exercises in hierarchy. Some say real policy emerged from them, slowly, very slowly. Others believe their true purpose was to maintain the illusion of control by allowing everyone a chance to vent in meter and metaphor. You believe in both. Midday, the meeting breaks for bread and sips of spiced vinegar. The discussion resumes with a scroll titled Preliminary Recommendations on Parchment Curl Prevention. A clerk has created prototypes, one weighted with clay beads, another gently dampened with blessed water. Each is presented. Each is frowned upon. Later, a motion is raised to formally adopt the new ink dilution ratio: 1 part soot, 2 parts gum, a half drop of oil of bay. After a heated exchange about regional viscosity differences, the vote is taken. It passes. Barely. There is no cheer. Just a collective sigh of bureaucratic completion. The meeting ends with a reading of tomorrow's topics: ribbon color redundancy, abacus noise complaints, the petition to rename scroll bins as scroll sanctuaries. You rise, joints stiff, mind strangely clear. Because while nothing earth-shattering occurred, something shifted. Consensus emerged. Debate happened. And all participants are now bound by the sacred vow of having sat through it together. You return to your desk. Write the minutes with appropriate neutrality. Discussion was had. Disagreements were noted. Decisions were mildly achieved. You seal it. Stretch. Yawn. And feel a quiet pride. Because in Byzantium, sometimes the meeting was the mission. Section 21. A smell hits you before you even open the scroll room door, dusty, earthy, oddly nutty. You follow it down the hallway and into a records chamber where 2 exhausted men are arguing over a pile of sacks. A third is furiously writing on a wax tablet with the intensity of someone trying to finish before the lentils explode. You've entered the department of bean inventory, and it is chaos. Today, you'll witness the Byzantine approach to agricultural logistics, where meticulous record-keeping meets vegetable-based absurdity. The problem is simple. The scroll says 800 sacks of beans were delivered, but the sacks in the room number 799, and there is no spoon. Check again, says the head clerk, who hasn't slept since Michael 7 was deposed. The spoon is ceremonial. Without it, the count doesn't count. You are assigned to recount the sacks. You count. You recount. You count again with your eyes closed, hoping muscle memory will provide clarity. Still, 799. Meanwhile, Eupraxia is assigned to check the scroll trail. She finds 5 documents regarding the beans: an order for 800 sacks, a receipt for 799 sacks, plus 1 spoon, a correction noting that the spoon was deployed in error, a complaint from a clerk who used the spoon to stir lentils, a blessing from a bishop who touched the spoon and declared it relic adjacent. You realize this is no longer a math issue. It's a metaphysical bean crisis. Historians still argue whether Byzantine inventory logs were really this detailed. Some claim they reflect obsessive administrative precision. Others say they were intentionally convoluted to prevent theft, confusion, or perhaps boredom. You believe in all 3. You assist in creating a new scroll, statement of partial receipt with ceremonial adjustment. You draw a small spoon in the margin, then label it iconic but non-essential. The day spirals. A new sack arrives, but it contains peas. Rejected. Another scroll surfaces, suggesting the original delivery was symbolically 800, based on theological numerology. Now wait. Someone mutters, "We were cursed the moment we counted." By late afternoon, the spoon itself reappears. It's sitting in the lavatory, being used to prop open the window. A junior clerk retrieves it reverently, wraps it in cloth, and places it atop the pile like a golden dome atop a basilica. Everyone applauds. Softly, the head clerk drafts a final report. Inventory confirmed as spiritually intact. Recommend blessing and brief nap. You sign the scroll. Seal it with the bean-shaped stamp. Feel strangely emotional. Because in this empire, even a single spoon can carry the weight of procedural honor. Section 22. The hallway smells of beeswax, mold, and old linen, the usual, but today there's something else in the air: ceremony. Not the loud kind, with gongs and incense, but the quiet kind, whispered from desk to desk. Today, an office is changing hands. Specifically, the desk of water rights ledgering, North Bay branch, is being passed down from one clerk to another. Not because of promotion, not due to death, simply retirement. After 43 years of counting canal access requests, the clerk known simply as Bion is stepping away. You're invited to the ritual. It begins at midday with a scroll reading. Notice of transference in the matter of water allocation oversight, Desk 14C. It is stamped, ribboned, folded, sealed, and, perhaps most importantly, perfumed with bay leaf oil. The replacement clerk, a young man named Philaritos, arrives in a plain robe with very clean hands. He bows low to the desk, not to the man, to the desk, because in Byzantium, desks carry weight, legacy, memory. Byzantine stands beside it like a monk near an altar. "This desk was made during the reign of Basil II," he says, running a hand across the scarred wood. "It has held exactly one spilled ink pot and 211 mistakes. I've forgiven most of them." Philaritos nods. "You are assigned to copy the transitional memorandum. It begins, 'Let it be inscribed that on this day, the desk 14C did transfer from the hands of the clerk of Bay Flow to his appointed successor with due reverence and minor dusting.' You include a sketch of the desk. It's mandatory. Historians still debate the personalization of bureaucratic tools in the empire. Some believe desks were assigned arbitrarily, replaced as needed. But evidence, memos, graffiti, unofficial oaths, suggests otherwise. Many desks were inherited, named, even blessed. This one is named Isidoro's. Midway through the ritual, Byzantine removes a drawer. Inside, 3 sealing rings, a dry date pit, and a short poem scratched into the underside of the wood. "Let rivers be measured, not forced. Let records float, not sink." You and Eupraxia exchange a glance. You both copy it into your notes. The final act is the lighting of the inkwell. A candle is passed over the new clerk's ink pot, symbolically warming it. This means the desk accepts him. Byzantine then places a stylus on the desk and steps back. No applause, just a nod. Philaritos sits. The office returns to its hum. But you feel it, that subtle shift. The empire turns not with emperors and armies, but with this, the quiet handoff of record-keeping from one generation to the next. At sunset, you walk past the desk again. It looks the same, slightly shinier. But if you look closely, you can see the shape of the past in its grain. And you whisper a wish. "May my desk one day be remembered." Section 23. A whisper reaches your desk. Then a second, louder one. By the third, it's a rumor with sandals. They're planning something. You follow the current down the hallway, past a slightly tilted painting of the Archangel Administrative, past Eupraxia, who gives you a knowing look, and into the scribe's alcove, where it's happening. The paper pushers are revolting. Well, standing up at least. Today, you witness the most timid uprising in imperial history, the revolt of the desk-bound. It begins with a chair. Theodulos refuses to sit, claims his cushion has been removed as punishment for excessive commentaries and footnotes. He stands beside his desk, arms crossed. It is a bold gesture in a room where rebellion usually means a strongly worded memo. Then another clerk stands. Then 2 more. The rebellion spreads slowly, in awkward postures. Backs stiffen. Knees wobble. One clerk sits back down, then stands again out of guilt. A scroll is drafted. The demands are clear. Reinstate cushion privileges. Allow 3 scroll breaks per day. And the unjust taxation of tea leaves labeled Private Reserve. Recognize March 17th as the Feast of St. Frixios, patron of hand cramps. You're asked to copy it in triplicate. You do very neatly. The scroll is delivered by walking slowly and staring intently at a crack in the wall to the Office of Superior Clerical Oversight. The head officer receives it without blinking. He reads it. He nods. Then he returns a reply scroll. It says, "Stand if you must. File when you can. Tea is being reviewed," which is neither approval nor denial. Classic. Historians still argue whether this uprising had any effect. Some call it the only labor action in Byzantine bureaucratic history. Others claim it was simply a coincidental group cramp. Regardless, within days, 2 cushions are quietly restored, and a tea tin appears on the break shelf labeled Blessed. As sunset creeps in, most of the rebels return to their chairs. One remains standing, just to prove a point. No one knows what the point is. He has become a kind of office landmark. You return to your desk. You write your own note. Revolt successful in spirit. Paper remains supreme. And you smile, because in this empire, even rebellion uses proper margins. Section 24. There's a quiet ripple in the chancery today. No footsteps. No hush gossip. Just the faint, unshakable sense that the end is near. Not the dramatic kind with flames and flags, but the dusty kind. You're told to clean your desk. Today, you copy the final scrolls of the empire. It starts with a memo. Please review holdings of Northern Aqueduct reports. Archive what may remain. It's unsigned. That's rare. You sit down, surrounded by half-filled shelves, absent colleagues, and a brittle scroll that reads, Inventory of chestnuts, winter of 1444. You laugh softly. No one joins you. There's no fire, no siege, just departure. Quiet and invisible. Theodolos hasn't shown up for 2 days. Eupraxia arrives late, carrying all her pens. She doesn't speak, just begins wrapping parchment in cloth. A clerk across the room mutters, They say the Ottomans are in Adrianople. Someone else replies, They were always somewhere. And that's the last conversation of the day. You write the final order approving grain disbursement for a village that may not exist anymore. You write a complaint about taxes too high to matter. You even write a love letter, and signed, tucked into the back of a cattle census. Someone might find it, or not. Historians still argue about what was the last thing written in the Byzantine chancery. Some claim it was a list of debts. Others believe it was a prayer. But there's one scroll kept in a forgotten archive in Mount Athos, titled simply, To whom it may still concern. You read it now. It says, We worked. We kept the names. We remembered the weights of grain, the names of rivers, the birthdays of saints. We made mistakes. We refiled. We joked. We watched the ink dry. If you find this, know we tried. We filed everything. Even this. You fold it, seal it, stack it neatly. And as the sun dips low behind the Hagia Sophia, you whisper one last blessing over your desk. Because in Byzantium, the end did not arrive with swords. It arrived in triplicate. Section 25. The archives are empty now. Not abandoned, just sleeping. You walk softly across stone floors worn smooth by centuries of sandals. The scent of wax lingers, faint but familiar. Ink stains on the desks have faded, but not vanished. And the scrolls, most are gone, stored or scattered. But a few remain, quietly curled, waiting. Tonight, you aren't copying. You aren't filing. You're resting, among the ghosts of clerks and their quiet, unending tasks. You lay down on a pallet beside a shelf labeled Lesser Edicts, filed with care. You run your fingers over the edge of the shelf. Dusty but proud. Nearby sits a faded tag. Revised notices, mostly accurate. You smile. You pull a thin blanket over your legs. It smells of old linen and beeswax. You tuck your stylus beneath your head, not for safety, but out of habit. A candle flickers on a distant desk. The flame dances as though someone is still working. Maybe they are. You think of Eupraxia's quill twirls, Theodolos' cough signals, the spoon, the peacocks, the foot warmer squabbles, the whisper codes, the upside-down memos, all the absurd, lovely ways an empire's soul held fast, not through conquest, but through paperwork. Historians still try to make sense of it. The borders, the kings, the falls. But you know the real Byzantium was made here, in rooms like this, with ink-stained hands and deep sighs and that one guy who kept misspelling strategos. You pull your cloak tighter. Let your breath slow. You imagine someone finding your last scroll and reading it by lamplight. Not because it's important, but because it's there. Filed. Remembered. Above you, the ceiling is painted with stars. One flutters gold. Just one. And so, you close your eyes, warm and weightless. The empire has gone quiet, but in the archives, it still breathes. Now let the stillness find you. Let your breath slow into gentle waves, like those that once lapped the shores of Constantinople. The sounds are gone now. No more quills, no murmur dictation, no rustling scrolls. Just the hush of paper, and the comforting sense that everything important has been written and filed and gently placed where someone might one day find it. Feel the weight of the blanket over you, like the weight of a well-filled shelf. Steady, dependable. Know that your stories, too, have found their place. Every little moment, every quiet decision, every line, even the ones no one else noticed. You are at rest now. The work is done. The candle's light has softened into nothing, and the records, yours and theirs, lie peacefully together. The empire has folded in on itself, not with fanfare but with care. And you, dear listener, are part of that memory now. So drift. Let each breath carry you a little deeper. Let the silence hold you. Let the night close gently around your thoughts. No alarms will sound. No tasks remain. You are safe. You are remembered. You are still. And sleep comes easily now.